as your Labor leader to discuss our Labor values. Values 120 years old, values that have shaped this nation, values that inspire us today and will inspire us tomorrow, values that we have fought for in the past and that we will fight for to our last breath. Every day, Australians demand that we answer the most important question that they can ask of any government. What do you stand for? They are right to ask. It is their government, not ours, and we should welcome the question because our answer is clear. Opportunity for all, not a theoretical concept, but as a call to arms, to be expressed every day in making sure men and women have jobs and that every Australian, child and adult, has access to the transformative power of education, no matter where they come from or what their circumstances in life. Not leaving anyone behind. Once again, not said as a platitude, but as a powerful statement that age, disability, ill health shouldn't spell the end of a decent life. Recognising our responsibility to the Australians of the future, to Australia's children. Just as parents work hard to give their children a better life, we work hard to give Australia's children a better life. Our sense of love and responsibility for the nation's children drives us on to make the social, economic and environmental reforms which will create Australia's future prosperity and share its benefits. Proud to call ourselves a Labor government and proud of our union heritage and union links, always ready to fight against Conservative forces who simply don't accept our core values and who represent the interests of the privileged and the powerful. And friends, they are circling again as the Liberal Party prepares to launch another attack on the rights of working Australians. These are our values, our Labor values, the values I have put at the centre of our government and at the centre of what we strive to achieve for the nation. They are my answer to that great question, what do you stand for, in words. But we must always answer that question with deeds as well. As we did 3 days ago when I stood in the House of Representatives and introduced the Clean Energy Future Bill 2011. Thank you. As we did 4 years ago when I stood in the House of Representatives and introduced the Fair Work Bill. On our best days, our values and deeds come together to dramatically change lives and change futures. Being our best means learning from the days when we could and should have done better. My responsibility as the federal leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party is this: to do everything in my power to ensure our party is always its best self. Being our best means facing up to some hard truths. We meet in difficult days for social democracy at home and around the world. We've lost government in Western Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. In the United Kingdom and New Zealand, our sister political parties are in opposition. In Europe, the tide runs against the centre-left, and President Obama, whilst confronting far more grievous economic challenges, faces comparable problems with hard right-wing activism that is long on complaints and conspiracy theories and short on solutions. The grand paradox of this lean season for social democracy is that it is occurring when catastrophic global costs of markets focused on profits but devoid of responsibility have never been more evident to working people. And when the power of ideas about social and corporate responsibility enlivens so many individuals and so much of public debate. It falls to us to analyse and to understand this contradiction of our age. We live in an age which at its best is one of individual empowerment and at its worst is one of stress, anxiety and confusion. A primary school child using a computer at school has more information available at his or her fingertips than was conceivable at any other time in human history. That child will grow up to be a citizen who expects, indeed who cannot even imagine, a world that fails to offer immediate answers, customisation, options, choices. But at the same time, for too many people, the lived reality of our world which is full of so much promise, is actually one of feeling adrift in a sea of information and overwhelmed by too much change. That lived feeling is that they have lost control of their lives. Indeed, I believe this clash of the choices of modernity with our need for security in life is one of the reasons that there is a sense of anxiety in our community. These trends of our age are much discussed and they're much analysed, and in that analysis many commentators have predicted that social democracy has gone past its use-by date, that our notions of collective action, solidarity, unionism are incompatible with today's individualism. Friends, I'm here to say to you that fashionable thinking is a mistake, indeed a grave error, driven by a misunderstanding both of our collective traditions and of our ability to apply them to the contemporary world. Our collective tradition began more than a century ago. Working men and women came together in trade unions, understanding that collective action gave them a power that they would never have alone. And that tradition of unionism and collective action gave birth to our political party. Ours is a party unashamedly built with collective action as our foundation stone. Its mission, to end want for working people. Its method, to stick together. A collective method given expression in many forms, from locality branches to affiliation with trade unions to the binding discipline of Labor caucus. At every level, we gave expression to our belief that numbers bring strength. To end want, we have argued for collective action through government, through a fair distribution of risk. Think of the great Labor achievement of Medicare. At its heart, Medicare was born because we said that the cost of ill health should not fall on and break an individual. It should be shared by each of us, by all of us. That the most healthy amongst us had an obligation to share the burdens of the most unwell. That life is so full of unknowable risks and that we would share those risks so that sudden illness wouldn't bankrupt a family. And in our historic mission of ending want, we have achieved so much, from the creation of the old age pension to our plans for a national disability insurance scheme. In the second half of our existence, we aimed higher. We have never left our concern about defeating poverty and sharing risk behind, but we have rightly worked for more. We have striven for a fair distribution of opportunity. We have worked to ensure we have a resilient modern economy that offers people not just a job, but the prospects of better jobs. And we have worked for an education system that gives working class kids a chance. As others have put it before me, the light on the hill now shines from a lamp on a desk. Friends, this mission of fairly distributing opportunity and sharing risk is not yet done. It won't be done until a child born into welfare passivity and a family that is dysfunctional gets as good an education as the child of a multi-millionaire. It won't be done until an Indigenous boy or girl has the same ability to get a job, a house, to build a good life as their non-Indigenous friends. It won't be done until we fairly share the costs of addressing risks, like the risk of being born with a disability, or the risks of mental illness, or of the incapacity that can come with ageing. Because fairly sharing opportunity and risk requires constant effort, working together to strengthen and modernise the economy so Australians have the benefits of jobs and even better jobs. Yesterday's snowy hydro scheme is today's national broadband network. Yesterday's dollar float is today's carbon pricing. Working together as well to revolutionise education, from early childhood through schools to apprenticeships to university. We should never rest and settle for second best in our world when it comes to quality and equity in education. I feel this deeply with every fibre of my being. If I had lived in any other age, it would have been impossible for me to be standing here. Education made me. Without great schools and Whitlam's reforms of universal university education, I would not be here today. Every child deserves the same chance. The need for collective action is with us today, and it will be with us tomorrow, because even as we still strive to achieve these great things together, we need to do more. Even as we still strive to achieve these great things, our understanding of our mission needs to deepen and our aim needs to be higher again. Understand collective action was never simply an end in itself. We saw strength in shared endeavour in politics. We saw value in sharing risk through government for a reason, because we wanted to empower the great mass of the people, the great mass of the people that Conservatives would leave behind. And as communities, families and individuals have embraced the benefits and empowerment collective action has brought them, they've embraced new opportunities and demanded new choice. So today, our ethos of collective action must respond to individual needs and demands for choice and control. For a long period of time, our great movement believed that if you could lift incomes and end poverty, that everything else necessary to get people on the road to a better life would follow. Now we understand that for our most disadvantaged, welfare support alone is not the answer. Of course, ensuring people have life's basics is necessary, but change only comes by marrying a requirement for personal effort and responsibility with the customised supports that give people a hand up out of poverty and dysfunction. For a long period of time, our great movement believed that the highest aspiration of a working person was for a decent job. Now we understand it can be to run a decent small business. Protecting rights at work will always be central, but building skills, rewarding enterprise, encouraging the embrace of risk, helping people to be their own boss is part of the dream of working people too. And for a long period of time, our great movement believed that one size should fit all in service provision, that those seeking choice were undermining collective aspirations. Now we understand that desire for choice is rightly strengthening, not abating. In this age, we need to pursue our historic mission while also embracing choice and creating new ways to give individuals more control. Australians want to make their own choices and control their own lives, but this can only happen if the power of collective action in creating opportunity, sharing risk and not leaving anyone behind is joined to meaningful individual empowerment, joined to personal choices and control. This is our Labor mission today. Cradle-to-grave opportunity, cradle-to-grave care for each other in the face of life's risks, cradle-to-grave shared expectations of personal responsibility met with a shared resolve to leave no one behind, collective action used to create great jobs, to build great infrastructure, to deliver great public services, and then collective action used to empower individuals to choose between these good things. Some Australians have always had the resources to make every choice they want. It is our task to ensure that every Australian has every choice, that the choices made by our people are never limited by the circumstances of their birth or where they live or what they do for work. So at every stage, our great party of collective action must embrace new ways of enabling individual empowerment. Friends, we are a movement in politics, not a school of philosophy. So we must answer the question, what does this mean in practice for policy and government? The example which is closest to my heart is my school. Publishing data on school performance has been both popular and controversial. Everyone knows that. But what I hope everyone also knows is why I did it. Because this is a reform which reflects my deepest determination and is based on the experiences of my own life. I don't forget Unley High School, where so much of my success in life began, but where other kids sat at the back of the room and did make work and were left behind. And this is a reform which exemplifies Labor's modern approach of joining collective action with choice for individuals, because it combines public funding for education of every child with publication of new information about every school. My school isn't just a conversation starter motivated by education quality and equity. It is an enabler of millions of choices powered by more information than ever before. It enables individual choices about which school is best for your child, community choices about how to make a school better, national choices about how to improve all schools. It's something I believe in, something I fought for, something which we have achieved together. And my school, along with many other policies we have pursued, and many more which lie ahead, rests on my confidence that Social Democrats, with our understanding of social solidarity and our sympathy for individual freedom, are best placed to respond to the needs of today. Working with my team, it's my job to shape our shared future. But I also keenly understand that in this age, our government writes the story of our collective future. Every individual wants to write the story of their own lives with more choice and control than ever before. This approach, combining the strengths of collective action and the opportunities of individual choice, needs to live and breathe in our political party as well as our government. Just as the Australian people demand customisation, options and choice in policy, so they demand this in politics as well. Some hold that the historic structures of the Labor Party are sufficient to the complex and personalised politics of today. I do not. I believe we must also embrace choice and control within our political party, not just collective action. Our national conference at the end of this year is an important opportunity to do this. This will never distract us from governing, but we do have a responsibility always to renew ourselves and our organisation. I look forward to the debate in December in Sydney. I am determined that we have a fair dinkum Labor Party conference, not an American-style convention. I want there to be debates. I want there to be votes. I want there to be surprises. And so that debate can be a real one and the openness genuine, I do want to put forward my proposals for party reform today. Not brought down from a mountain and written in stone, but brought up from the members through an election review I initiated in a process I began. Here's what I'll propose. First, we should aspire to be a growing Labor Party with new and active members. So I'll set the party a challenge, recruiting 8,000 new members next year, and I want the party conference to sign up to that challenge. Second, we should embrace a community organising approach to ensure we are growing and we are connected to the community. So I'll move that we increase our local connections to Labor supporters by trialling community pre-selections or primaries in some seats. I understand and respect the concerns of those who want to ensure that primaries are about community, not a vehicle for maximising the voices of special interest groups. The trials will be a genuine learning experience and are important to working through these concerns. Third, we have to offer a richer experience for members of our Labor Party, including by giving them more opportunities to have a say and a direct vote in important decisions. So I'll move that we embrace the party members' empowerment reform proposals proposed in the Faulkner-Bracks-Carr review, including the proposal that the national president, elected by members, serve a full 3-year term without rotation. And fourth, we need to modernise our structures and recognise that the old branch structures alone are not the future. So I'll move that we embrace online membership and opportunities for supporters to become more involved. So members and supporters can hear directly from me and their Labor government, and I can hear directly from them. Friends, this is what I propose to reform and modernise our party. And this is what I want to discuss at our open conference, which I look forward to this year. I don't want to get my way on every precise detail. I don't want everything sewn up by some meeting at midnight the night before. I do want change. This is vital if we are to strengthen our party and be a party of ideas. On the day I ordered our review, I was determined to create an opportunity for reform which this great party would not squander. I remain so determined. This is my approach to our great party's future, not change for its own sake, but progress for a purpose. So our party and our movement are always their best. So we fight for our values in the future just as hard as we fought for them in the past. So we always stand for opportunity for all, so that we always insist no one is left behind. These values are the measure of our responsibility to Australians not yet born, the motive for the nation-building reforms we pursue. But they are more than this. They are a statement of hope for the future, a statement of our enduring optimism for this great country we love. They are the tenets of our abiding Labor faith that we really can build a working man's paradise in this land. I'm optimistic by nature, but as an Australian and as a Labor person, I am more than that. I am optimistic by experience because of what has already been achieved by our people to make Australia what it is today. I'm optimistic by observation because of the millions of Australians who each, in their own way, do so much to make this place a better place for tomorrow. And my optimism is determined, specific, real, because I don't only see that better country we can be in the future in my own mind's eye. I don't want it to just be me who can envisage that future. I want the kids, like those at the back of the room at Unley High, to see it as well. I want them to see a country where their education is the best in the world and where their education is as good as any other Australian child's. I want them to see a country where they can find a job and keep a job, get a better job, and where their boss respects their rights at work. I want them to see a country where they are cared for and protected if they become mentally ill, if they become disabled, and eventually if they age and become frail. I want them to see a country which is courageous enough to act on the threat of climate change. For them to see all of that, for our nation to be all of that. Labor must be true to its values. Labor must be at its best. When I knew we would meet at Old Parliament House today, I began to look forward to the opportunity of coming here to address you in this historic place. It's a grand thing to come to this old house of the people, this home to many of Labor's grandest days, here where we enacted Medicare and Medibank before it, here where we legislated the Snowy Mountain Scheme, home to grand days of Labor courage and conviction as well. Here where Caldwell lost the 1966 election and won his place in history, speaking as a voice for reason and right when the drum beat and the trumpet sound. Here where Curtin's courage kept us free in times of war and Chifley's convictions built a nation for the peace. Here where Labor caucuses met after hard fought-for election victories, understanding the responsibility that came with governing for the nation's good. And it's a grand thing to address the Labor faithful as well, because ours has never been solely a parliamentary caucus or a campaigning organisation. Labor in Australia is a movement of people in a great cause for change, a movement for the future and a party of hope. That is what we have been on our best days. That is what we have been on our bravest days. I firmly believe it is what we remain on this day in this House. I absolutely know it was what we will remain in all of the days to come. Thank you.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for that speech, and we know that you take your leadership of this nation and also of the Labor movement very seriously, and that you do also, like those before you, understand that responsibility. And it's our great privilege to have you spell out your approach to that today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have questions coming in, many questions from the internet, and I'm sure that there are many people in here who have questions. Going to your discussion about risk, and I think about your vision about dealing with climate change in a serious way and how those two things marry together. Dennis Waylow, I hope I have pronounced that right, Dennis, has asked about help for pensioners under a carbon price.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny, and thank you to Dennis for his question. We have made sure, as we've gone about this huge challenge of putting a price on carbon pollution and reacting to climate change, making sure that we reduce our carbon pollution, that we've looked after Australians on the way, and particularly our lowest income Australians, which is why, as we get polluters to pay this price, we'll use more than half of that money to assist Australians, particularly low-income Australians. So pensioners will see an increase in their pension, It will be more than they are people with tight budgets, and we want to make sure that we are particularly assisting them. And so we've taken our labour values to do the design of putting a price on carbon, and our labour values always dictate that we don't want to leave people like our pensioners behind.
Prime Minister, thank you. And may I ask you a question on this Malaysian solution?
Sure.
Now, under this Malaysian solution, we will send 800 and we will get 4,000 back from them. But it is expected that we will get much more than 800 on our source. Then where are we going to process them? Onshore or offshore?
Okay. Thanks for that question. And the whole aim of the arrangement with Malaysia is that because of the strong message of deterrence, that what we'll see as the result of returning people to Malaysia is we won't see people continuing to risk their lives at sea by getting in boats. And I'm sure all of us remember where we were and how we felt when we first saw the images from the Christmas Island shoreline just before Christmas as people lost their lives and drowned at sea, and we don't want to see people getting in boats and taking those risks. And so this will send a big message of deterrence. And so the advice to us is that in returning people, we may never get to the 800, because the message of deterrence is so strong that we send a message to people not to get into a boat, not to take the risk. That is what the scheme is designed to do, to take away from people smugglers the very thing that they are trying to use to profit off the misery of other human beings.
I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Shankar Chatterjee from Vilkon Sub-Branching.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
John Goss, University of Canberra. The problem of reduced participation in political parties is something that we see across our society, with reduced participation in churches, in service groups and in sporting clubs. Is there anything that governments can do to nudge people towards more participation in their community, more connectedness? Because the research indicates that if people are more connected, then it does reduce alienation and improve mental health.
Thanks for that question. I am actually very optimistic about the future of community connection and engagement. I get the opportunity to meet a lot of young Australians, and I'm always blown away by the altruism of the current generation of young people. They are an altruistic generation, and they do think about how to assist others, and we see many of them go around the world on aid-based adventures where rather than going and sitting on a beach, they go to a developing country to help build a school. We see Australians in large numbers, particularly young Australians, thinking about those things. We also see them engage strongly in the challenge of climate change, and from the perspective not only of seeing our world change and our environment improve, but also helping those in our world who are at the most risk. So a very altruistic generation, but also an options generation. And so they aren't going to be attracted to doing the same thing over and over for 40 years, maybe attending a local community organisation week after week, year after year in the same structure. They will engage in different ways. And the new media, the new social media, enables them to find some of those ways of engaging. So I'm actually very optimistic about that altruism and what it can mean for our community. I'm very optimistic about what it can mean for us as a political party and the engagement in Labor. But we have to find the right way of putting the hand out to bring people into an engagement with us and our debate about ideas and the great ideals of our movement. And some of the party reform measures I've outlined today are about doing precisely that.
Prime Minister David Grant, President of the Yass Valley branch, one of the grassroots branches of the ALP. You spoke very eloquently about Labor and its ideals. You gave us a wonderful list of the achievements that we've seen since 2007 as a consequence of our time in government, and you spoke very well about how those achievements have been based on a principled approach to our politics. You've challenged us to recruit, to grow the numbers in our party. In my branch, my grey hair is probably the least of the grey hair, and this is a common problem. But can I tell you, Prime Minister, that last night we discussed at our branch meeting the issue of the Malaysian solution and where to after the High Court decision. Without getting into that particular issue, the underlying sentiment that was expressed by the branch was that we have a perception out there, and it's a strongly held perception amongst those of our members who are falling away, that we're about politics, not policy, that we are no longer pursuing our goals from a principled position but from a political position. Can I suggest that if we're going to be engaging new members, we need to move away from that. If we're going to be maintaining our existing members, we need to move away from that. I campaigned in 2007. We had a wonderful conversation that ran from sitting parliamentary members through NatSec out to the community and back up again, and it really was a genuine two-way conversation. My question to you is, how are you and your parliamentary colleagues planning on, one, shifting that perception of acting from a position of principle rather than a position of politics, and how are you going to work with us as grassroots members to rebuild that conversation?
Okay. Thanks for that question. I believe we are a movement that is rightly self-analytical, and in some ways what we're doing today is talking about ourselves and our future and strengthening us as we seek to design and strengthen the future of our nation. So we're right to be self-analytical, but I don't think as we are self-analytical we should necessarily talk ourselves down or accept critiques that others would use of us. I believe when you look at this government's actions, what you can see on our best days is that, enlivened by our strongest Labor principles, we do some of the hardest things. This is the week bringing the Clean Energy Bill to the Parliament, enlivened by our Labor principles and our values, that it's not in us to shirk the challenges of the future. It's not in us to say to people, let's just cower and someone else will fix that. It's in us to bring our Labor values and principles even to the most complex of changes, and we're doing that. And we're doing it too as we deal with the economic transformation in our nation, as we're seeing the mining boom causing places and regions and some industries to leap ahead, but causing us concern about manufacturing and other areas where great working people have made their livelihoods. We bring our great Labor values to how do we strengthen and modernise this economy so that we share opportunity and we don't make this a nation of, patchworks, places where people are leaping ahead while others are left behind. And I think we've taken our great Labor principles too into education and health, and we look to more reforms, national disability insurance, the ageing reform, which are driven by our views that we shouldn't leave people behind. So these are our great Labor values. Yes, we've always got to wake up every day and say, how can we do it again today? With all of the stresses and challenges of modern politics, we've got to make sure we're our best self every day. And there are days where we need to learn from, where we weren't our best self, and we need to learn the lesson of those days. On the arrangement with Malaysia, I know these questions are controversial in the party. They always have been. From the days that Jerry Hand, as Minister for Immigration, representing the seat of Melbourne, introduced mandatory detention, all of the way through. They have been controversial, and in part controversial because it's a difficult area of policy where your natural instinct to make sure that we are protecting the values we share of compassion and honouring our international obligations, our refugee convention, come up against some hard realities about people losing their lives at sea and how we can best protect from that happening. And so as we've weighed all of those things, we've done it informed by our labour values, but also informed by what we believe will best work to stop people being at those incredible risks. One of the things I can say about the caucus meeting we had on Monday this week, we don't normally speak about what happens in the caucus room, but at the conclusion of the discussion we had in caucus about the Malaysia arrangement, I said to caucus that I was tremendously proud of them, not because they had all expressed one view, there was a real discussion, but because everyone came to that discussion working through what was best for the nation, confronting this complex area of policy, rather than coming at it from a political perspective. To a person, they all engaged strongly in the policy debate, and that's something I think we should be proud of.
Ben Halliday, Black Mountain Sub-Branch. Look, our branch has passed lots of motions, like a lot of branches, about workers' rights in particular. You talked a lot about the collective action and the links to the trade union movement, which obviously we're all for. Well, I hope so. One of the things I'd like to ask you about is the fact that while the Fair Work Act is obviously an improvement on what the Coalition had on before, and that it has brought back collective bargaining, we do find a real disconnect between the values of collective action and the reality of when workers find themselves having to defend their jobs. At the moment, we're only allowed to take protected industrial action during a bargaining period. Has the government considered actually looking at our obligations to the International Labour Organisation, the right to strike, the right for workers to democratically decide in their unions to take action in defence of their interests, whether it's to save their jobs, whether it's in support of community values or a particular issue? Those are my concerns, and I know there were concerns that overwhelmingly were supported by our branch, and they do get put up quite regularly at branch conferences around the country. So I've just put that out there. It's a bit of a tangent to something else, but obviously welcoming the moves that we've got. But I mean, really, we need to back up the values with the reality, which is if my employees that I work with, they were told they were going to lose their job tomorrow and it was unjust, it would be illegal for them to actually take collective action in a real way to actually get the employer to really, sit down and work out.
Thanks for that question. And can I say to you, I think the Fair Work Act, as we designed it, is incredibly true to our labour values and our labour instincts about fairness and dignity for working people, about enabling collective action, and about recognising that being represented by your union, if you choose to be a union member, is a working person's right. It's the individual right of the person to choose. Do I want to be a member of the union? Do I want to be in a trade union? And if I do, then I've got a right to be represented by it. And the Fair Work Act puts that into law, and I believe that is absolutely in accord with our labour values, and a very big contrast to the work choices legislation we swept away, in which you may have seen Peter Reith, back to form, is now urging the Liberal Party to adopt again. And we remember, Peter Reith and the days of dogs and balaclavas and the waterfront and everything that went with it. So that's their tradition and heritage, it's not ours. But our tradition and heritage has always been one about managing the conflict that can happen in workplaces and making sure that our economy is strong and it's modern and it's offering people the benefits that come with having jobs. And so we do have the enterprise bargaining base of Fair Work. As a movement, we've been endorsers of enterprise bargaining since the days of Hawke and Keating, since the days of Bill Kelty and Simon Crean in their earlier iterations in the ACTU, and we're holding to that productivity, the future of enterprises, is best worked through at an enterprise level as working people and their unions bargain with their employers. For people who are unjustly dismissed or lose their job. There are other remedies in the Fair Work Act. You don't need to look to collective industrial action for that. There are other remedies in the Fair Work Act for unfair dismissals, for being dismissed for trade union activity. The protections in that sense have never been stronger at any time in our industrial relations law. So I believe it's got the policies right. The political task, I believe, which lies in front of us is defending it, because I used in the speech the words "they're circling again." I genuinely believe that to be true.
Prime Minister, we're probably coming to the end of your time, I think. We've got one more question coming in from online, and from, in the tradition of Twitter, I believe this person could be called Harry Ashblack, but who can be certain? Harry Ashblack says to us, what would you say to a young person who wants to join the Greens?
Right. Well, I'd say to Harry, I'd say to any young person in that position that I understand what it's like to be young and idealistic and want to change the world. I went to Adelaide University and in my second year there saw some very unjust education cutbacks from the Fraser government and decided that I wanted to change that part of our world. And having changed that part of our world, I got the enthusiasm for wanting to change the rest of it and to make sure that it's a more just place. So I understand what it's like to have that passion and enthusiasm. I also understand that at the end of the day what matters is putting that passion and enthusiasm into effect. And to do that you need to be a party of government, not a party of protest. And across our years of operation and work, all of the decades, indeed more than the century that we've shared these great Labor values, what we've done is we've changed lives by being a party of government. And so to put all of that idealism into effect, to bring all of that passion to a decision-making table where it's really going to make a difference, you need to strive to be a party of government. And so I'd say to that young person that we want their energy and their ideas and their enthusiasm. We don't ask them to come to Labor and be uncritical or without reflection. We'll create more ways for them to put their views forward through the party reforms I've outlined today. But we'll always ask them to accept the responsibility that comes with being a party of government and all of the magnificent opportunities that it brings.
In fact, your staff tell me, and I hope it's all right with you, that you do have more time and we can extend it, so there's a few more hands.
Sure. Hello.
Natalie Shepherd from Salopia South Branch. One of the most important things that came up in the 2020 summit organised by Kevin Rudd some time ago was the Republic. Now, it just got lost somewhere and it keeps on getting lost, and it's not because we are not trying. I think somehow or another people at the top have to also make an effort. Where in your very basic schedule for the next 2 years would you be able to consider the discussion, debate, whatever, of the Republic?
I suspect I don't have the world's best news for you, which is our focus in terms of constitutional change is going to be on a recognition of Indigenous Australians, and Jenny Macklin is working with a very expert and eminent group on that question now, and we'll have something more to say about that before the end of the year when that expert group reports back. There is also an important but more modest proposal for change, which is the recognition of local government, more modest in the sense that it's still nation changing to recognise local government, but I believe our emotion will be on questions of constitutional change and better recognising where our nation came from and our Indigenous peoples. So that is going to be our focus over the next few years. The Republic debate, I believe, is one that will come back onto the national political agenda when we see a greater sense of it living and breathing in the community. I think passions were raised about being a republic, but to be frank, I think they've abated since, and people's eyes have gone to some challenges of today, like climate change and some of the other big changes that our nation needs to make. I believe inevitably we will be a republic, but I think it's going to take a concerted effort over quite a long period of time to work in the community and to rekindle the enthusiasm for constitutional change that we would need.
Prime Minister, my name's Garth Morrison. I'm the President of the Bungendore branch, not far away from here in regional New South Wales. Look, across New South Wales, we've had problems with membership numbers falling. It's my firm view that this is the party that is the one to be proud of in Australia. This is still a party that's sensible. It believes in equality for everybody, regardless of circumstance. How do we get that message across?
Well, thank you, and thank you for doing the work as President of the branch. I know what it's like to be President of a locality-based branch, not in Bungendore, but I was in Melbourne for a long period of time, President of a branch, and it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of enthusiasm, and I do genuinely thank people for doing all of that work that makes such a big difference to us. For us, when we consider the full sweep of Labor history from the 120 years ago to today and the many years that lie beyond, we will see tougher days and we will see easier days. For us, the passion has to be there every day. And so for us, I believe it's about clarity of purpose, about being very clear with people what our movement is for, how we seek to organise and work and what we want to change, and I've made a contribution to that today. Reflected in your government, in this nation's government, our nation's government, we have to see those values in action, in words and deeds, clarity of explanation, but also precision of action, so people see our values live in their own experience through the things that change around them. We live in a different age in terms of communications. It's got great opportunities and it's got some challenges. The great opportunities are the things that are enabling Jenny to sit on the iPad and to bring questions to me from people very remote from this room. The challenges are that there's a fracturing of our media environment, there's a hype and temper in our national discourse that hasn't always been there, and that doesn't make it an easy environment to prosecute nation-building reforms and nation-changing ideas. But it's up to us to do it, and if we don't do it, no one will. And so we will do it. And on the days that it's hard, then we'll reflect, but we'll get up the next day and we'll try again harder to make sure that we're clear, constant, true to purpose, and always explaining that purpose in both words and deeds to our community. That's my mission, and what bolsters me in it is that I don't do it alone. I do it with my great colleagues in government, but I know I do it with thousands and thousands and thousands of Australians who are involved in the Labor Party, in the Labor movement, in trade unions, and who have the same sense of purpose and belief.
Ken Helm, a winemaker.
Oh.
So first of all, I'd like to congratulate you and your Treasurer for the latest rejection of any change to the wine tax. I'm sure I talk on behalf of many other winemakers in Australia.
I'm very confident we're heading for morning tea and nothing else, but always nice to meet a winemaker.
Thank you. My question is also about, you mentioned Ben Chifley Snow Mountain Scheme as yesterday's achievement, and today's achievement is your broadband. Could you enlighten us on what you see as the future infrastructure program that you would like to introduce? Would it be perhaps a integrated another water scheme, or perhaps a very fast train from Cairns to Melbourne to perhaps Perth?
If you look across all of the areas where we work, we are and continue to be big investors in infrastructure, in our traditional infrastructure of roads and rail and port, the things that make us more efficient as a nation, great exporting nation that get goods and people where they need to go. We've been huge investors in the infrastructure that makes a change for the services that Australians rely on. Building the education revolution was about protecting jobs, but it's changed Australian education. I go to schools all of the time that teach differently now and in a higher quality way because they've got the capital that enables them to do it. We've brought the same to hospitals, to emergency departments around the country, to the services that people rely on in some of the most highly stressed moments of their lives. And by changing the capital, we've changed the way that people can engage in those services. And the NBN rollout is with us now. It's going to be with us for a few years to come. It's going to take a long time to build the NBN, a number of years to build it, and to have the full transformation across our nation that it will mean. So our eyes are fixed on delivering those things. We expect people to have a national conversation about where next and what might lie in the sort of decades ahead. And Anthony Albanese has fuelled but also informed the very fast-train debate with a sense of perspective and size and scale. And I think that's really important because there was a lot of talk without the facts and figures. It's important people have got the facts and figures. But we've got a lot already on the table in infrastructure and we'll be very focused on delivering it.